Good to have you with us on this Friday. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is off. We begin this hour with the ongoing investigation into Jeffrey Epstein. Today, former President Bill Clinton is set to testify before a House Oversight Committee. It's part of their investigation into the late sex offender. Yesterday, his wife, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, testified to the same lawmakers for hours. The big headline: she says she has no information about Epstein. NBC News Washington reporter Alice Barr joins us with the details. Alice, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. The testimony is not happening here on Capitol Hill, with members of Congress traveling to New York for both depositions, with a long list of questions for the former president today. In a first-of-its-kind move today, former President Bill Clinton set to answer questions from lawmakers under subpoena in the House Oversight Committee's Jeffrey Epstein investigation. The committee chair promising a longer deposition today.
We have a lot more questions for Bill Clinton
than the 6 hours former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton sat for on Thursday.
I never met Jeffrey Epstein, never had any connection or communication with him. I knew Ghislaine Maxwell casually as an acquaintance.
Neither Clinton has been accused of wrongdoing, but the questioning comes after former President Clinton's photo and name appeared multiple times in the Justice Department's released Epstein files. The former president has said he cut ties with Epstein before learning of any of his crimes.
I think the chronology of the connection that he had with Epstein ended several years before anything about Epstein's criminal activities came to light.
Democrats saying Hillary Clinton answered openly, as Republicans assert they at times
weren't satisfied with answers.
Democrats now arguing the committee has set a new precedent
about talking to presidents and former presidents. And we're demanding immediately that we ask President Trump to testify.
Republicans making that appear unlikely.
President Trump has answered hundreds, if not thousands, of questions from you all about Epstein.
As the Epstein controversy hits a new marker today. And the committee chair said one thing he's seeking from former President Clinton is insight into how Epstein managed to surround himself with such powerful people. The Clintons wanted their depositions to be open to the public and the media, and the chair has promised to release transcripts and videos as soon as possible. Joe?
Alice, I know Hillary Clinton's deposition was briefly interrupted yesterday. Walk us through what happened.
Yeah, this was supposed to be a closed hearing, but early on it was briefly derailed when Congresswoman Lauren Boebert sent photos to conservative influencer Benny Johnson, who posted them widely. The deposition resumed, and Boebert said that she was not reprimanded. Joe.
All right, Alice, thank you so much. We are getting new information about the people on board the boat that was involved in a deadly shootout with Cuban border troops on Wednesday. Cuban authorities say 4 people were killed and 6 were injured in what they say was a, quote, infiltration with terrorist purposes. They said all the people on board were Cuban residents of the U.S., but 2 U.S. officials tell NBC News that American citizens were among the passengers. NBC News reporter Ed Augustin joins us now from Havana with the latest. So, Ed, tell us more about what NBC is learning from these U.S. officials about these Americans and what happened to them.
Good morning, Joe. U.S. officials have told NBC News that 2 of the people that were on that boat Wednesday morning might have been Cuban-born, but they were U.S. citizens. And one of them still is, because from what we've learned, 1 of those U.S. citizens was killed in the shootout, 4 killed. Another one is injured and currently receiving medical care in Cuban hospitals. Once again, 4 killed, 6 injured in what was initially thought to be a speedboat, but now we discovered it was actually a fishing boat that appears to have been stolen, that infiltrated Cuban waters, and the shootout, according to Cuban authorities, happened 1 mile from Cuban shores.
Ed, we're also learning a bit more from NBC News sources about some of the people detained, their affiliations with an anti-Castro group. What can you tell us about that? Yeah, there are lots of fringe anti-Castro groups in Florida more broadly, and this goes way back, ever since the 1959 revolution. You know, the 1959 revolution was an armed struggle. It was a violent overthrow of a violent dictatorship, but violence was the means by which state power shifted.
And so for a long time in Miami, throughout the generations, there have been people committed to armed struggle, overthrowing what they see as a illegitimate regime here that should be overthrown by force. And yesterday, the president of the Cuban Republican Party, which is a political organization based in Miami, said that one of the dead was a member of that party. Now, he said the Cuban Republican Party did not condone and was not involved in the armed infiltration, but he did confirm himself that he is one of the members. I think it's worth pointing out to viewers as well, you've got to kind of put this in historical context. There is a political force in Miami that does call for violent overthrow of the Cuban government. They have done since the 1960s, and they continue to believe in that today. And Cuban claims that this was an armed incursion seem to be backed up by some circumstantial evidence. So, for example, 2 of those on the boat were publicly named by the Cuban Ministry of the Interior 2 years ago. They described them as terrorists and said they were involved in sabotage.
Ed, what are we hearing from the Cuban government just about the investigation and its willingness to exchange information with America?
I think in many ways, if we zoom out and look at the big picture, this is the most interesting thing, because US-Cuban relations are massively fraught at the moment. The US is committed to regime change in Cuba by the end of the year. The US has put a de facto oil blockade on Cuba. It's not allowing oil in to the country. People are dying in hospitals. People are lacking water. Food prices are going up. Massive toll on the civilian population. And yet Cuba's attitude is conciliatory. I was at the press conference yesterday where the vice deputy minister, foreign minister, said that they are not only open to collaborating with the US, they always say that, but collaborating with the US to try and get to the facts, as he put it. And interestingly, it's not just they're collaborating with the US authorities or the Coast Guard, they're collaborating with Marco Rubio's State Department. That's according to the Cuban Ministry of Foreign Relations. Fascinating stuff, especially given all of the speculation about a possible deal in the works.
All right, Ed, appreciate your reporting from Havana. Thank you so much. Here in New York, a Columbia University student is back home this morning. She was released from ICE custody after Mayor Zohran Mamdani says he raised her case directly with President Trump. The student seen here after her release was taken in a dramatic early Thursday morning operation. University officials say federal agents posed as police looking for a missing child to gain access to an off-campus apartment building. That's where they arrested the 20-year-old over what DHS said was a terminated visa. DHS says agents identified themselves and were let in by the building manager and the student's roommate. The arrest sparked large campus protests, with Mayor Mamdani saying he talked about the case with President Trump. He was then told the student would be released imminently. NBC News correspondent Valerie Castro joins me with the latest on this. So, Valerie, what do we know about what happened and what DHS is responding to? I know the student posted on her Instagram story she is safe and okay.
That's right, Joe. She's posted on Instagram, but we have yet to hear from her directly about what happened yesterday. So we have the version of events from the campus acting president, and we have what DHS has told us. The president of Columbia University, she says that this was 5 federal agents who arrived at the building around 6:30 yesterday morning. They say that they misrepresented themselves, that they were there looking for a missing child, and that's how they gained access to the building. But Claire Shipman, the acting president, she spoke out yesterday after the student's release. Take a listen to what she had to say about what happened.
Our security cameras captured the agents in the hallway showing pictures of the alleged missing child. Once inside the apartment, it became clear they had misrepresented themselves. A public safety officer arrived, asked multiple times for a warrant, which was not produced, and asked for time to call his boss, which was not given. The agents took our student. This was a frightening and fast-moving situation and utterly unacceptable for our students and staff. We started work immediately to gain her release.
You heard her saying there that this was captured on surveillance camera. We should note the university says they are not releasing that video at this time. DHS did issue that statement yesterday confirming that ICE arrested Elmina Agayeva, that is the student, and they say that, as you said earlier, the roommate and the building manager, according to ICE, that is how they gained access to the building. They say the student has no pending appeals or applications with DHS, all according to DHS.
Real quick, that soundbite there from Shipman that was released from the university, I'm assuming there, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about Mayor Mamdani here, because he says he spoke directly with President Trump about the case. He was actually at the White House yesterday. What are we learning about those conversations and what role the president may have played in this?
Mamdani was scheduled to be there to meet with President Trump yesterday. He was talking about a housing project here in New York City. And while he was there, he also brought up the cases of 4 other students who had been detained asking for their release. And it just so happened this happened yesterday while after Mamdani was there meeting with the president, that he raised the issue with this specific student. Mamdani tweeted later in the day that after that meeting with the president called him and said that she would be released. And of course, that's what happened later in the day.
We're hearing from the student's lawyer who says that they're filing a habeas corpus petition. Explain what it is they're looking for there and what happens next.
The petition was filed yesterday asking the court to stop the administration from transferring the student out of the district, out of the Southern District of New York, where this case was filed. They say that she is an Azerbaijani national, that she was held in detention without justification, and they called for her immediate release. Of course, that is what happened later on in the day. It's unclear what happens next, if she will have to go back to court. Her post on Instagram following all of this just saying that she's still in shock over what happened, Joe.
All right, Valerie, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Fresh off his State of the Union address, President Trump is taking his economic pitch to the campaign trail this afternoon. He's set to deliver remarks about his energy agenda in Corpus Christi, Texas. The president's visit to the Lone Star State comes just days before Republicans are set to cast their ballots in the Senate primary there. But Mr. Trump's coveted endorsement is noticeably missing from this competitive Republican primary. 3 of his allies are on the ballot: incumbent Senator John Cornyn, State Attorney General Ken Paxton, and Congressman Wesley Hunt. NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen joins us from Washington with more. John, good morning. So what should we expect to hear from the president today in Texas, and why is it he's not endorsing a candidate in this primary?
Joe, if you like the State of the Union, you're probably going to love what Donald Trump has to say in Corpus Christi today. Expect him to go out there and repeat a lot of the same themes that he had in the State of the Union, touting what he believes is a strong economic record that will turn the economy even further around in his telling of what's going on in the country right now. And so this is part of the normal post-State of the Union rollout where presidents go out and try to reinforce their message across the country. He is, as you point out, going there on in advance of this primary, this tough Senate Republican primary, and has not endorsed a candidate. I think the biggest reason he hasn't endorsed a candidate is that all 3 of them, Ken Paxton, Wesley Hunt, and Senator John Cornyn, have all been pretty loyal to President Trump. And the way that he usually distinguishes between candidates is he endorses the one who's loyal to him or endorses against the one who is disloyal. None of them falling into that disloyal category here.
His Vice President J.D. Vance also on the campaign trail in Wisconsin yesterday after making an announcement on Wednesday that's tied to his new role addressing fraud. Take a listen.
Announcing today that we have decided to temporarily halt certain amounts of Medicaid funding that are going to the state of Minnesota in order to ensure that the state of Minnesota takes its obligations seriously to be good stewards of the American people's tax money.
So, John, did the vice president address what the administration is calling this war on fraud when he was in Wisconsin yesterday? And just overall, how do these campaign trail visits reflect the administration's strategy with the midterms well underway now?
He did talk about fraud in Wisconsin, a state, as you know, very close to Minnesota, right next door to Minnesota. So he talked about the fraud situation. This is something that the administration has been talking a lot about. He is now the unofficial fraud czar. He also talked about a lot of the elements that President Trump talked about during his State of the Union. There was not a heavy emphasis on tariffs, which is something the president has really been pushing, but not so much everybody else in the Republican Party. So, we'll have to see whether that continues for anybody other than the president. But J.D. Vance doing the same thing. Again, this State of the Union rollout in as many places as they think they can get to until they get bored by that, which is typically what happens with the White House and the cabinet post-State of the Union.
Let's talk about what's happening back in Washington. Yesterday, a federal judge gave the Trump administration the green light to continue with construction in that $400 million ballroom at the White House. What exactly did the judge say in this ruling, and just what does that mean for the timeline here for this project?
I mean, I don't think it was very much of a surprise that this is going to continue to go on. The timeline is going apace. I don't think there really was anything that stopped this from going forward, Joe. The president has the ability to spend these funds on the White House. Presidents have reconstructed the White House in various ways before. And so, I think, you're going to see a ballroom at the White House, when all said and done.
All right. John Allen, good to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jim.
In Arizona, investigators are looking into a potential new development in the ongoing search for Nancy Guthrie. Authorities say they're investigating a never-before-seen Ring camera video of a car that was near Guthrie's home at around the same time of her abduction. It comes as the FBI shifts its investigation into a new phase. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz is in Tucson with the latest.
This new Ring camera footage obtained by Fox News Digital shows the car driving around 2:30 a.m. the night Nancy Guthrie was abducted. The sheriff's office says they're aware of the video, which was taken about 2.5 miles from her home and outside that 2-mile perimeter where investigators had asked for video. An FBI source tells NBC News since Nancy's disappearance, investigators have amassed 5,000 to 10,000 hours of footage that agents are now going through. It comes as the FBI is in the process of handing Nancy's home back over to Savannah and her family. Two law enforcement sources tell NBC News that after weeks of extensively searching the property, investigators no longer feel a need to seal the home off as a crime scene or restrict the family's access. Nancy's street also now closed down to public parking, limiting the media presence outside the home. This will now be the second time the property has been returned to the family. 2 days after Nancy's abduction, the Pima County Sheriff announces investigators had completed their search.
The scene is done. We're done with the residents. We have turned that over to the family.
But a day after the sheriff said that, the property was sealed off, this time by the FBI.
The main significance of handing the house back is that that is going to be the end of the ability to collect evidence. Any evidence that they would collect, any defense attorney would say, this could be contaminated, this could have been planted. This is the end of the line as far as collecting evidence goes.
And as for the thousands of hours of video footage they've obtained, an FBI official says that investigators now need to watch every piece of that video in real time. That remains one of the key parts of this investigation. And while there are many boots on the ground still in Tucson, a senior law enforcement official says there are also now scores of agents centered here in Phoenix at the FBI field office, where they are now analyzing intel and poring over all that evidence. Back to you.
All right, Liz, thank you. Time now for your morning news now weather and a look at what you can expect this weekend. Angie Lastman joins us now. I see the word clipper. We're not talking about a haircut, right?
No, we are not, Joe. You are, unfortunately, we're not talking about the haircut. We're talking about the kind that brings us cold air and potentially snow. But we've got a bit of a warm up in some spots, and it's not all bad news. So let me give you kind of the lay of the land. This is what we're going to deal with here as we get into the weekend specifically. This weekend, we've got a clipper system that's going to slide through the Midwest and the Northeast, and it's going to bring some really cold air and, yes, the potential for some additional snow. And we've got kind of multiple of these happening, but late Sunday, we're going to see some of this really warm, moist Gulf air kind of collide with that cold air, and we'll basically see some of that snow and ice develop across parts of the Midwest. As we get into Monday, this is when things ramp up for folks across the Mid-Atlantic. This is where you'll see some of that mixture of the snow, the ice, Washington, D.C., stretching down to Raleigh and back towards the Ohio Valley, included in that. So even places like D.C. in your afternoon hours for your commute on Monday could be a little tricky with those slick conditions. By Tuesday, this lifts up to the north, and we're seeing this kind of mess once again across parts of the Northeast. That means early morning snow and the potential for ice for that region. And the good news is most of these areas are going to transition over to rain here by the time the second half of Tuesday gets underway. So between Sunday and Tuesday, some impressive amounts in some of those higher elevations, 4 or 5 inches, I think, is the larger amounts that we'll see when all is said and done. In the meantime, right now, we actually have much of the country running way warm for this time of year, except for parts of the upper Midwest. 21 degrees in Minneapolis for tomorrow. Green Bay still at 23 degrees. This is part of that system that's going to kind of slide down and bring us some cold air. As we get into Sunday, much of that spreads to the east. So 35 degrees in Boston, 22 for Buffalo, Cincinnati at 42. And then Monday morning, really chilly, 19 for your temperature in New York City. As we look to the afternoon hours, temperatures for the early part of our upcoming week. Upper 30s Monday, but upper 20s in New York City on Tuesday. We've got the 50s in Washington, D.C. on Monday. And we will see really actually kind of a nice weekend on Saturday in places like New York City. We'll nearly reach 50 degrees. But I urge you to get outside on Saturday if you live in places like New York City.
Because it's going to go down from there.
Once again. And we'll be talking about, again, a couple of snowflakes flying as well. So
the good news is if you haven't used all your sweaters yet this season, you still have time to try them out.
I'm so sick of my winter clothes. I am ready for spring clothes for sure.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.